Hi, it's Alistair McIntyre at Electric Scotland. My video this time around is going to be about independence. I've always felt a kind of warm feeling about Scotland being an independent country, and to be honest with you, over recent years I've been getting increasingly detached from that idea. I got to the point where if I hear Nicola Sturgeon talking on the television, I tend to switch it off because I don't know, it just seems to me she's very small-minded. She's always whining about everything. It's never the SNP's fault, it's always someone else's fault. And to be honest with you, I just hate that. What I'm not seeing at the moment is any great vision for how Scotland could go forward as a nation. And so I've decided that I would start to look at some of the history. And of course I started with the Union of the Parliaments. Now, bearing in mind that Scotland and England were separate countries, separate names obviously, but when they joined up they became Great Britain. So the English name and the Scottish name came out and we ended up with Great Britain. Now I know in the early days of the Union things didn't go that well, but I found when I was doing my research that Scotland actually did extremely well after that period. And you can see that Glasgow, for example, was the second city of empire. And these were the days when the British Empire was being created all over the world. Fabulous time. And if you read the histories, you can see that the Scots just grabbed that opportunity and went out in the world and just made a huge difference to almost every country of the world where they settled, fought, traded, etc. And frankly, I don't think anyone in the world didn't know about Scotland. I mean, yes, they talked about Great Britain and Britain, but pretty well everyone knew about the Scots because after all, it wasn't that long after that period, the middle of the 18th century onwards, that we had the Scottish Enlightenment. And to be frank with you, I think it's incumbent on all Scots to really get to know their history and the history of the great people, especially through the Enlightenment period. I mean, we're talking here about people like Adam Smith, David Hume, Lord Kaimes, Francis Hutcheson, etc. These were people that, were just world thinkers. They thought big time. And Adam Smith, he changed. In fact, he gave us the GDP. He gave us a whole new economic way of looking at the world. David Hume took philosophy and just argued for a whole new way of thinking. And people still quote these people today, even in modern texts. Lord Kaimes, if you look at it in science and literature, in manufacturing, the Scots were leaders world over. If you wanted miners, Scots were always in demand. If you wanted people to build railroads, the Scots were there all the time. I mean, think of the largest ever railroad project was the Canadian Pacific Railroad. That was from coast to coast, thousands of miles. But yet, right at the very top, the guy that actually got that going politically was John Macdonald, who was the first Prime Minister in Confederation of Canada. He was a Scot, born in Scotland. And then we had, the financier of that whole thing came down to Lord Strathcona, again a Scot, born in Scotland. And he was obviously the governor of the Hudson's Bay Company, one of the largest organisations in the world. And the Hudson's Bay Company owned lands that were bigger than Europe. You need to read his history, because what he achieved was just amazing. And so if you look at the fact that Glasgow was the second city of empire, I mean, shipbuilding was massive. And of course, the Cunard line was one of the really top shipping lines of the world. And almost all their ships were built in Scotland on Scottish shipyards. And then we had Robert Dollar. He was known as the father of American shipping, in a sense. I mean, certainly he opened up trade with China under the American flag. I mean, what he achieved was amazing. And then we've got, I mean, for example, Chinese. A lot of people don't understand the Chinese very well and the way they think. But Confucius was the basics, had all the basics of China. And of course, one of our great translators, again a Scot, had translated that into English so that everyone could understand the thinking of the Chinese, which helped open up fantastic trade. And if you look at Hong Kong, you know, when we had that, I mean, basically it was Scottish merchants and shipping pioneers that actually created Hong Kong. So what I'm kind of looking at here is if you look at all these people, they were involved in England and lived in England for a period of time. Then they moved to other countries of the world and lived and worked there, as well as coming back to Scotland. So this was a period when we had Great Britain, yet Scots were leaders. I mean, the way the political situation happened in Great Britain itself was that the English tried to take charge of pretty well all the domestic things going on in Britain. But even if you look back then, there was 132 Scottish MPs in Parliament. Now these were MPs of English constituencies. So a Scot moved down to England, settled, and became the Member of Parliament for their constituency. 132 Scots represented English constituencies in the Westminster Parliament. That was huge. There was a lot of talk in England at the time of the damn Scots taking all the jobs. But in actual fact, Scots, because they weren't doing that well in getting important positions in Great Britain itself, Britain itself, went out in the world and got phenomenal positions, leading everything in the empire itself. So we were the people that went out and basically conquered India and ran India. We were out in Australia in big numbers, New Zealand in big numbers, Canada in enormous numbers, and America. I mean, there was a time when something like 20% of all Americans were of Scottish descent. But obviously over the years they've got lots of more Mexicans and everything coming in and other people, but nevertheless at the heart of the building of America itself, a whole ton of Scots involved. And of course the Scots, we call them Scots-Irish these days. These are the border Scots that mainly went to Ulster, Northern Ireland, and basically started up businesses there. And they're now known as the Scots-Irish in America, because when America was discovered and was opening up, there were huge numbers of these Scots that previously sat in Ulster decided they would go to America, because there they'd have freedom of religion, and they'd be able to get lands that they owned and didn't need to rent. They could actually own their own land. And they saw phenomenal possibilities there. And that's why they flooded over. And so many of the presidents of America were actually from that Scots-Irish race. So when you look at the history, Scotland doesn't need to be an independent country to be hugely successful. And I just feel more and more and more this call for independent Scotland is a waste of time. I mean, if you look at today, yes, Scotland did have a major contribution to Great Britain when we had all the oil and gas. Sorry, excuse me. But now that the oil and gas isn't giving us any money at all, in fact we're actually starting to lose money in the oil and gas industry, that's when the being in Great Britain serves us immensely, because now England is contributing to help Scotland, whereas we used to contribute to help England out. And I think that's the key to this, that we have a shared heritage, 300 years of shared heritage and working together. And if you think of the number of Scots that went and fought for France, I mean, if you look at history, you might not know this, but way back, England was about to conquer France, and France, in the extreme emergency, asked Scotland to help, and we sent over about 20,000 of our soldiers, and we defeated the English for the French. But if we hadn't done that, France wouldn't exist. It would be English. And what that would have done, who knows how that would have changed things. But the fact of the matter is that the most serious defeat Scots ever had was at the Battle of Flodden, when our king and the cream of our leaders were killed at that battle. But that battle was because we'd signed this agreement with France that we would support each other. And again, England was attacking France, so France asked us to attack England to try to draw off some of their soldiers. And therefore we were basically said, you need to go fight England now. We didn't want to do that, but because of that agreement, we stood by it. And as I say, we had that disastrous battle at the Battle of Flodden. Read about the Battle of Flodden and you'll see how disastrous that was for Scotland. And then because we were two separate countries, we still had this issue and problem that Scots weren't being allowed to trade in various countries of the world. They put barriers up against us, the English did. I mean, the Darien scheme, for example, England didn't support that, Spain certainly didn't support it, and because we got no aid or no help, it literally bankrupted Scotland. Because it was our big chance to try and get out there in the world, because we weren't getting access to the American markets, the Indian markets and so forth. And so that was our idea, to create this Darien scheme in South America, where we could make a new big trading bloc. I mean, the idea was amazing, but the execution, unfortunately, was poor. And again, read about the Darien scheme, so you can see the ideas we had behind it, but why it failed at the end of the day. But the thing is, the Scottish establishment put a lot of money into that, because you could see the potential. But because it failed, it literally bankrupted most of our big landed gentry and our rich merchants and so forth. So it was an absolute disaster for Scotland, and to say literally we were bankrupt. But because of the Union of Parliaments, the English basically gave a lot of money back to Scotland to help Scotland out, and that got us out of the lurch and allowed us to start progressing with trade. And by golly, we took that opportunity, because we now had access to all these English markets in the world, and we took them by storm. That's why I say Glasgow became the second city of empire, with its shipbuilding, its steels, its mills, and its science. I mean, James Watt, you know, the steam engine. We started the whole Scottish Enlightenment, and that was a powerful time in Scotland. We had new thinkers, thinking that literally changed how we did things in the world, not just locally in Scotland, but in the world. America adopted it. Capitalism came to the force with Adam Smith. I mean, what we achieved in that enlightenment was just amazing. There were people quoting us all over the world that, the best place to be born was in Scotland because the thinkers that were coming out of there. The trouble to me is that we've put all this effort into building Great Britain, of which we are part, and yet now we want to leave it. And, if you're thinking about all the oil, I don't know if you're aware, but around Heathrow Airport, they discovered a huge oil bed. It's almost as big as the North Sea oil, but it's on land. We're not using it because you need fracking to get to all that, and we're a bit dodgy about fracking at the moment. But nevertheless, there are huge resources of oil in England. Huge resources. Again, do your research. Put in your England discovers oil, or whatever you do, and you'll find the stories. And that's really what I kind of basically mean, is that right now we're net receivers of benefit through the Barnett formula. But there is absolutely no shame in that whatsoever, because everyone recognises that in Scotland it's more expensive to run our national health service, our education system and so forth, because we have far more rural areas and island communities, and they all cost a lot more to serve. But everyone in the United Kingdom, Great Britain, is entitled to exactly the same service no matter where you live. So that's why we're a net recipient. But of course we don't specify that the Barnett formula gives X amount of money for health, or X amount of money for education, or X amount of money for anything. It's a block grant. But it's based on the needs of Scotland for its education, its health and policing and so forth. But it's the Scottish Government that decides how to allocate that money to all these various parts. And the trouble is, Scotland right now is not doing well, and it hasn't done well since devolution. Now, I ask you, what has devolution actually given to Scotland? I'm finding it extremely difficult to find out what it's given to Scotland. Yes, we got free prescriptions, we got free university places, and we got rid of bridge tolls and stuff of that nature. But overall, that hasn't really made much of a change to Scotland at all. But we still have this massive inequality in Scotland that just hasn't been addressed at all. And I can't see how an independent Scotland could do any better, because basically health and education, which are two areas of great concern to Scots, are completely devolved to the SNP government. Not just SNP, but the devolved government of Scotland. It's a devolved government under Labour, Lib Dems and now the SNP. They decide what to do with the block grant that comes in from the Barnett formula. And if they don't make the right decisions, then we have a problem. And I think it's when you look at the Enlightenment period, you saw massive thinkers that literally changed the world. But where are those people today in Scotland? We seem to be very small-minded in Scotland. If you look at the energy industry, thorium is a new means of doing nuclear power, but it's greener than windmills. Have you read about thorium? There is an article in, I think it's Stick Scotland today, in fact, that I read. And it goes to show that we could use thorium nuclear plants that give really no waste product at all, and it's greener than green. Yet we don't seem to even considering that. Even fracking can be very green. But we seem to not want to make decisions. And that's the trouble with our current government, in that they won't make decisions. They won't try and look at the big picture. They won't look at new ways of doing things. And that, I must confess, that's why I thought an independent Scotland would be great, because I thought we could free our country up to think differently from the rest of the world, really make a change. But unfortunately, It just seems to me that Scotland's more conservative than England. Conservative with a small c, meaning that we don't seem to want to change anything, or if we do, it's twiddling on the edges. We need bold visions for Scotland and how we can make a huge difference to our country. I mean, if we adapted thorium, as I've just been reading today, as our main area for energy, I mean that could be billions for the country. It's like our fishing industry is. I mean, how can you justify losing 100,000 Scottish jobs in the fishing industry? How can you justify that? If you can justify that, then you're a really horrible person, I have to say. 100,000 jobs went because of the common fisheries policy. And not only that, it lost over 2 billion in annual income for Scotland. Now, you think, oh, but we still want to be a member of the EU, we still want to be, because we're in that, we have to be in the common fisheries policy, so, we're not going to get any of that back. And these people, well, I'm in Glasgow, what do I care about a little rural village somewhere? Well, that's just sick. It really is sick. And if you think that's acceptable, then you're not a very nice person. And you're certainly no place to, get out of Scotland. We don't want you kind of people in Scotland, that's for sure. And that's what I mean. I'm just so fed up of Scotland whining on about it's all Westminster's fault. Boo! It's all everybody else's fault. It's never our fault. Well, we have to come to a time when they said it is our fault. We have devolved powers in Scotland and we're not using them. We're simply not using them. And if we don't have the thinkers and the people that have the breadth of vision, then Scotland's never going to be anything other than what it is today, which is a pretty useless small country, to be honest. Whereas I thought it could be a huge influence in the world. But I forgot that our education system's gone down the tubes. And why? Well, let's be honest about it. The thicker you are, the more you'll accept whatever is told to you. You won't have the guts and the vision and the intelligence to challenge things that you're being told. And Nicola Sturgeon is probably one of the most skillful politicians we've got in the world. She can spin things and she'll tell you the truth, but she'll never tell you the whole truth. She'll tell you enough of the truth for you to believe her. And of course, being suckers and uneducated and unintelligent, as the Scots are beginning to become very unintelligent, we accept what she tells us. And we're lazy, we're not prepared to say, well, if she says that, is that true? How did she get these facts? Where are these facts to be had? Go and look them up yourself, because they are available. But no, we can't be bothered. We don't have the time. Well, if we don't have the time, we're never going to have a country that is ambitious and really successful in the world. And if you think about it, we got 750,000 people that were born in Scotland that now live in England and the rest of the UK. 750,000 Scots of this generation, born in Scotland, now live in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. Ask yourself, why? Our population, was it just over 5 million? That's including babies and stuff like that. I don't know what it is of the growing population, but 750,000 Scots born in Scotland are now living in England and Wales and Northern Ireland. But the vast bulk, of course, in England. 700,000, I think, just in England alone. And these are statistics that you can look up. Don't accept my word for it. Go and look at it. Look at your your immigration and emigration figures. They're all up, available on the web. You can look them up yourself. And then we talk about exports. They keep saying to us, yes, but Scotland exports 4 times more to England alone than it does to the rest of the EU. In all honesty, that may be correct, but I would bet my bottom dollar that not a single person, a single business in Scotland looks at a sale to England as being an export. I mean, why would you? Because you're selling to your own country. You're selling in the same currency, you're selling with the same language, the same laws. There's no difference whatsoever. That's not an export in my view. And so if you look at the export that Scotland actually does to the rest of the EU, these exports have flatlined over the last 15 years. So since devolution, we haven't exported any more goods, despite Scottish Development International and Scottish Enterprise. I've often said Scottish Enterprise is the most unenterprising operation I've ever seen in my life. But Scottish Development International, they say, oh, we've got 300 million more inward investment. Well, you know, we need 3 billion at the minimum. 3 billion I'd set up and take no, but 300 million, that's nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, it's better than nothing, I'll grant you that. But I mean, we need seriously a number of billions. I mean, look at our deficit that we've got at the moment. Was it 9.4%? And the thing is, England's performing a lot better than Scotland is right now. Now, that didn't happen all the time, but the thing is that it's doing better. And so we need to find ways of doing better, to export more, to be more visionary and entrepreneurial in what we do. But it doesn't seem to be much of that going on in Scotland right now. And I'm just feared that if we get an independent Scotland, we're just going to go even further downhill, because I've got, admittedly, as soon as you become independent, Scotland's got a 15 billion black hole annually. And how are we going to fill that? I mean, the Scottish economy is in stagnation. And in fact, I saw one article recently saying that the last 10 years has been a lost decade for Scotland. We've made no progress in anything. And even if you look at the SNP, when Alex Salmond said his ambitions for Scotland, I mean, I think he hasn't achieved any of those ambitions he had for Scotland. Again, I ask you, just do your own research. Don't accept my point. I just, because the thing is, I put a report very recently about the teaching of Scottish history in our schools. And the report started off basically by saying that Scotland's one of the very few countries of the world that didn't bother teaching the children in Scotland their own history. I know when I was at school, I was at Dollar Academy, a good public school in Dollar, as a boarder for 7 years there. I think for a few years I got, I think it was a weekly history class. And I can't actually remember any Scottish history being taught in that history class. I was very good at history, I will say. I usually got first place, in fact. But I can't actually remember being taught any particular Scottish history when I was there. Now, I understand that there's more history being taught in Scotland today, although I'm finding it difficult to find out exactly how much, and I'm doing ongoing research on that. But because clearly most people aren't interested in history, I think that's a real shame, because I think you need to look at the past to see how things changed and how certain people made a huge difference. And you've got to think, well, if they can do it, why can't we do it today? I mean, where are the really big thinkers in Scotland these days? I frankly don't know of any. I mean, I know we've got multimillionaires. I mean, one guy made a fortune out selling exhausts. But I mean, what has that done? I mean, what intellectual benefit is that giving us today? You know, we need thinkers. We need new ways of doing business in the world. We need to change. And I don't know where we're going to get these people from. Because, unfortunately to me, each government, the devolved government we've had in Scotland, only want to bring in their own supporters to all these little committees looking into things. They want people to back their ideology, but unfortunately politicians on the whole are pretty damn poor thinkers. A lot of them aren't overly intelligent either, or visionary or anything. They're just pretty ordinary people that are tasked with doing an extraordinary job which they fail to do all the time. I mean, there are highlights. I mean, John Swinney, for example, is a consummate politician. He's managed to run the finances of Scotland very well under difficult circumstances. But the whole policy of the SNP is not visionary. It's not how do we get a lot more money in. And Nicola Sturgeon's little jaunt around Europe has led to nothing for us whatsoever. I mean, that's where I'm thinking, where are these visionaries? Where are we getting them? And why aren't the Scots asking more of our politicians, no matter what they are, Liberal, Tory, SNP, whatever? We need to ask them to have a better standard and have more guts to do big things for Scotland and change things. But right now, I can't see that having a devolved government has done anything for Scotland. I can't see any major change since we got devolution, other than we've got a whole load of extra people that we're having to pay salaries to. And not only that, but the problem really is that everything's getting worse in Scotland, not better. I mean, I can't point to anything in Scotland that's got better. I really can't. And that's what I was trying to find out. I said, what has devolution given to Scotland? And this is where you thought the SNP would be trying to do something brilliant, because well, look what we've achieved with devolution. Surely with independence we can achieve a lot more. But unfortunately, all the SNP point to is that we're getting worse under devolution, not better. And as I say, as a country, I mean, we together, England and Scotland and Wales, I mean, we created the British Empire. Why did the British Empire go away? The reason the British Empire went away is we went bankrupt because Germany caused 2 phenomenally damaging world wars. That's Germany for you. Germany killed millions of people because of their 2 world wars. Millions of people. And right now, because they can't have another world war, they decide they're going to have a world economic war. And so they now control, along with France, the EU. And yet, you want to be in the EU. You want to be... And don't forget that after the Second World War, the Axis countries wrote off half of Germany's debt. But do you see any sign of Germany forgiving Greece any of their debt? No. Germany lovely accepted the complete half write-off of their debt that America and Britain had to fund. So at the end of the day, because our industry in Britain was pretty devastated because of all the bombing, as was Germany's, Germany at least got all that relief, which allowed them to rebuild their factories with more modern equipment, whereas Britain didn't have the money to do that and had to struggle on with old equipment. And that's why, and of course to fund the world wars, we had to sell off all our foreign assets and everything. And America jumped in at the very latter end after we pretty well bankrupted ourselves. Then they came in, but by that time they bought up all our assets and everything. So I mean, America hasn't done any favours for Britain. Don't get me going on that either, I tell you. They did and I don't blame them. I mean, I'm not blaming them. They just saw an opportunity and they took it. But it didn't help the British Empire for sure. And if you start reading about the British Empire, we were actually pretty damn good with people that we actually controlled and ran and stuff like that. I mean, at the end of the day, we've still got the Commonwealth, which is still that hangover from the Empire. And I do think the future for Scotland is very much in the UK and in the Commonwealth. I think that's where we can get a lot of our exports from under Brexit and stuff of that nature. So I just can't see an independent Scotland doing very much for the Scots. And I think we're better within the UK. And I think we want to be playing a better part. I mean, for example, these negotiations on Brexit, no one's going to allow Nicola Sturgeon to be in with these because they don't trust her. I wouldn't trust her if I was the Tory government, because she's actually said that everything she does is anti-English, wants to break up. So she will tell all kinds of lies and do and give away our negotiating position if she thinks it will damage us. You cannot trust that woman in these Brexit negotiations. And she's brought that up on herself, and because it's herself in the SNP, she's brought it on all Scots. Now, the Scots can no longer be trusted. And that's damn disgrace. Because after all, it's us that helped to build the empire in the first place. I want to give up all that. Terrible. So, I mean, as I say, that's why I'm really now against independence. Because frankly, I think with our lowering education standards, we're just not getting the people that we need, the big thinkers, the new visionaries. They're just not happening in Scotland. We're not learning, and we're not willing to learn, and we're not willing to change. We'll change little things on the edges that really make no practical difference at all. So we need big thinkers. I mean, Dyson, Englishman, I mean, he sees Brexit as a phenomenal opportunity for his business. He's delighted with the changes. But that guy is a visionary, he's an entrepreneur, he's an inventor. He's the kind of people that we need in Britain. And we have too few of them, unfortunately. But anyway, that's what I want to talk about. I wanted to say to you, look, don't just accept what people say to you. Do your own research. But unfortunately, most of you don't have the time because you'd rather go to a party or something like that than read something serious. I mean, ask yourself, what have you done for Scotland? What have you personally done for Scotland? I mean, what have I done for Scotland? For 20 years, I've been running Elected Scotland's as a history site for Scotland. I'm putting up a whole pile of information that you can refer to. And it's not politically agenda or anything like that that's on it. Pretty much all of the stuff is about our history and about the great Scots that were had in the past. I've got hundreds of biographies of Scots in all walks of life. So you can read about them, you can read how they started their early life. And you know, it's amazing the people that have done extraordinary things and yet started in the most humblest of circumstances, went to one-room schools. And yet out of that, they became world leaders in their fields. So, if they can do it, why can't we do it? But we're so busy on our iPhones and messaging, frivolous stuff around the place. Yes, I want a better life, but I'm damned if I'm going to pay for it, you know. I would ask you, don't accept anything that politicians tell you. They're all liars, they're all spin artists. Some of them are a lot better spin artists than others, that's for sure. But the thing is, make up your own mind about Scotland and where we're going. But to do that, you need to learn the history of Scotland. I mean, for example, you talk about the NHS and the welfare state. Well, do you know, at the end of the day, the two people that got us that was Churchill, a liberal Tory, and Beveridge, a liberal. These were the people that created the NHS and the welfare state. It wasn't Labour, it wasn't the SNP, they weren't really around in those days. But, you know, that's what I'm making a point. I mean, learn for yourself. Don't just accept what people tell you. There are still facts out there. I mean, admittedly, we know the current SNP government, and maybe before them the Lib Dems, hid information. I mean, there was a new annual report came out on education, but the SNP decided not to release that because it's not worth it, really. We've heard it all before. Next year we'll do a proper report. But the only reason that you don't release a report is because it's bad news. If it's good news, you release the report. I mean, does that not make some kind of sense to you? If it's a bad report, you don't want to tell your parents, for example. If it's a good report, you really want to tell your parents how well you did. You know, so I mean, there's a certain logic there. And why is it that the Scottish government is not being more transparent with us? I mean, for example, the oil and gas report, because we're starting to get to the point where we're losing money, they decided that they would only release that bad news report on the very last day of Parliament so no one could question it. I mean, that is just wrong. Under any way you think about it, that's just wrong. And that's not transparent, that's not being a good Scot, being open with the Scottish people, giving them a chance. I mean, that's not to say if you're wrong about something, you can't correct it. You know, we're not all right all the time. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes, but we'll learn from our mistakes. And if we've made a mistake and we don't have the skill set to fix it, we go out and we get consultation with other people who perhaps do have the skill sets to help us fix the problem. That's what you do in life. But it seems in politics, common sense has just gone out the window. I mean, for example, we're talking about we should do more on tax. Well, where is this current SNP government asking us the question? Would you be prepared to pay another 5p in the pound for tax if we put all that money into the health service and cured all the problems? I mean, how many people would say, yes, I'm willing to do that? But they're not asking us these questions. And that's what I hope with Independent Scotland, that there would be much more engagement between our politicians and the people, that they would be asked our opinions on things, and they would genuinely listen to us and be willing to try new things. And if they don't work, well, at least we tried it, and we can try something new and different the next time round. But unless you try things, you never know if you're going to succeed or not. And that's what I wanted out of an Independent Scotland. I wanted people that were genuinely honest with us. And if they make mistakes, they admit it. And we don't haul them over the coals because, who hasn't made a mistake? And who hasn't made a quite serious mistake at some time in their lives? We all make them. So why should we castigate a politician for making a mistake? We shouldn't. It's wrong to do that. But at the same time, you have to admit mistakes and then get into a discussion about how you can fix that mistake and how you can overcome it and make it a benefit. That's what we need in Scotland. And I see no evidence of that happening anywhere in Scotland. And that's really why I'm against independence, because I can't see that being improved with us being an independent country. And I think, to be honest, we need to get in a much stronger position before we even consider independence. But even if we went independent, we need England. Don't kid yourselves. We need England. And if you're going to piss off the English are going to say, well, up you, the Scots. We don't need your oil. We don't need this. We don't need that. We can buy it from elsewhere. And they'll go and buy it from elsewhere. We need England. Look at Ireland, for example. Ireland's got a real problem today because they followed the UK into the EU because they realised that if they didn't, they would have a horrendous economic problem. But now the UK is coming out, Ireland are actually a bit desperate, thinking, well, maybe we'll need to come out as well, because a third of their exports go through England. So it may be that Ireland, to preserve its financial position, might need to leave the EU as well. That's what I say, is that I think we need to get together, and frankly, Scotland needs to be part of the UK, and we need to be fighting for the UK. In the years down the road, if we want to go independent, we can go independent by all means, but I think we still need to have a great relationship with England. If we're going to part, we should part warmly and friendly. But right now, it's just vicious hate going on all over the place. And all that's going to do is damage Scotland and continue to damage Scotland. It's ridiculous. So anyway, there you go. That's some of my thought. But my sincere thought is, go and look at the Enlightenment period in Scottish life, because that was a part when we were recognised all over the world as the big thinkers in the world. And that's why, like in medicine, we were huge. We had so many doctors that I think almost every doctor in England was a Scot, and there weren't enough places in England after that, and we had to go overseas to get good positions in medicine. We had a phenomenal record in medicine. Again, read about these things, learn about what we achieved back in those days, and ask yourself, why aren't we achieving it today? Look at shipbuilding. Shipbuilding is almost all Navy frigates and ships that are building these days. Yet, there was a real expert, a professor, who's working out in the Far East. He saw great potential for us to get a much better shipbuilding business going in Scotland. Came back over to Scotland. No one would give him a hearing. The government wouldn't give him a hearing. No one would give him a hearing. So he went back and said, "Ah, the hell with him." And I'm seeing that so many times because I'm overseas myself. I'm talking to people who saw opportunities for Scottish films. You go back to Scotland, you tell them about it. Do you mean I've got to work for it? I'll take the order, just give it to me. No, you're going to have to do a bit. Oh, but if we're going to do a bit of work, forget it. I mean, we need a central reservoir where Scots expats can fire in potential leads and something that actually followed up. But we don't have that system in Scotland. We're pathetic. And I'm so sick, fed up of getting pathetic. I mean, for example, if you're paying a guy a big salary in Scottish Enterprise and Scottish International, I think, oh, they're paying far too much money. But frankly, we should be paying them a hell of a lot more money so that we attract the absolute cream to run these organisations and come up with the new ways of doing things. We need to be paying more money, not more money to the idiots that run it today, because we don't pay the big salaries. The really good people aren't interested in running Scottish Enterprise or Scottish Development International. And that's the trouble, you know, I mean, you want the really good people, you've got to pay the big bucks. And if you don't pay the big bucks, you ain't going to get the big thinkers that can make a real difference to our country. And so, you know, let's try and wake up. Read some of these biographies of the Scots. I mean, read the biographies because you're bound to have an interest in something. That where we had a great Scot that did amazing things in whatever field you're interested in. Read about them. Read how they managed to get on and how they got on in the world. You can learn so much from reading about people's biographies. So, I mean, please start to read some of the stuff. Put some time aside, even say a couple of hours on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening or something like that, and just read. I mean, the biographies themselves are usually very interesting. But you're reading about the challenges that these people had and how they overcame them and how they became really successful. They're really fascinating and you can learn so much from them. So please read up more about history because you'll learn how people did things in the past. We can apply them to today because the same things apply today as they did in the old days. We have new means. Yes, the internet's a huge change, but even the internet, we could have led the internet. I know personally we'd have led the internet because I was one of the leaders in the internet when it first came up, the web first happened. I was already very large in the online industries and bulletin boards, which were the precursors of the web. And I knew that was the future. And I told everyone it was the future. And everyone went, ha, 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 ha. And then the web came out. And it was out for some years before suddenly the journalists started to notice it. Then it exploded on the scene. But I knew all about the web before it exploded on the scene. And I told members of Parliament, I gave them talks around the place, how we could take it. And if we got Scotland working together, we could be a total leader in the world on it. But they all yawned, didn't do anything about it. Another missed opportunity. So I can tell you from personal experience, I know that our banks are thick as two short planks as well. I talked to the leading bankers at the time. I talked to councils at the time. No one was interested. I mean, one guy said, oh, we're not going to give local businesses a free directory entry on our webpage for the council. But if you think about it, if they'd done it and that results in extra orders for that company would have employed more people, would have made more money, they would have paid more tax, moved into larger premises, paid more rates. I mean, it'd been a win-win situation. But the stupid, thick people in the economic development departments of the council said, oh no, they've got to pay it. We want £100 from them for an annual advert. Otherwise they're not getting their website mentioned. Absolutely stupid, thick, pathetic. And that's, unfortunately, the people we've got in Scotland today. And in the last 50 odd years. They're just not thinking. So anyway, I won't go on, but I hope that's maybe giving you some thoughts. I'm certainly against independence today. I might change my mind again in the future, but I frankly, listening to the SNP over the last 10 years, I've just gone down and down and down. I mean, from being quite enthusiastic about what we could do as an independent country, I'm frankly at the point where I can't see independence doing anything but bad for Scotland. And that's the SNP. I'm so sick of it. I'm not whining on and blaming everyone else and not taking responsibility for anything. I'm sick of it up with it. And so I'm saying independence, forget it. Let's get the bloody Tories in to Scotland. Because after all, the Labour and the Lib Dems and the Liberals and the SNP, they've all failed Scotland. Let's give the Tories a chance. And if they fail, then we've got to conclude that we just can't run ourselves as a country. So maybe think about that when the elections come up. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye bye.